forward. We have some outstanding panelists joining us. So do join us and this event. And coming to today's event, which you all been eagerly waiting for this is culture, leadership, and pandemic. In fact, when Ganesh Challa called me for something else to talk, take it forward, when I requested him, why can't you do something leadership issues? Because so many things are happening today. He right away agreed, to do this, and right away agreed. And immediately the whole thing was conceptualized. I can tell you within 1 hour. So within the 2 hours, all the panelists and things. That is the efficiency which Mr. Ganesh has been working with us. We have got a very, very outstanding distinguished panelist whom I'll be introducing to you a short while from now. Let me have the privilege of welcoming all the panelists and also all the viewers watching the program live from our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. And before that, let me request Mr. Ganesh Challa. Ganesh, you all know, is contributed significantly as a human resource leader in the place of organization development as well as HR management. And he's also an executive coach and authored a fantastic book. We had the privilege of launching at MMA, already ready for the corner office. He is also MD and CFI of Coaching Foundation of India. I request Ganesh to please deliver his introductory remark. Over to you, Mr. Ganesh.
Thank you. Thank you, Group Captain. Wonderful, always partnering with the MMA. Thank you, Mr. Ravichandran, for being there as the president of MMA, one of the most successful management associations in the country. There is nothing in the world which has ever touched us at an emotional, physical, intellectual, psychological level as the pandemic has. And it continues to touch us in ways that are unimaginable for all of us. And therefore, it has been an effort for many of us to think beyond survival, to think beyond ourselves, our immediate environments and settings. Yet I do know that the task of leadership is to think far beyond and look at what the implications of the environment are for not just us, but the organizations we lead. And to also say, what can we do to create an environment in which people can flourish and business can also flourish? That's the power of leadership, to not just be impacted by the environment, but to positively impact the environment. And that is what is the culture of the place we live in, the smell of the place that we all belong to. And therefore, this event is about culture, leadership, and what the pandemic has meant for all of this, and how it has impacted us and how we are going to impact it. And we have a fantastic panel of speakers and, of course, an outstanding moderator to lead us forward. Over to you, Group Captain. Friends, enjoy the evening. Thanks, really thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you again for setting the context, very beautifully put why we are doing this event today with some outstanding panelists. As I mentioned to you, let me have the privilege of briefly introducing, because all the panelists' profile has already been shared with you along with the invitation. Let me have the privilege of introducing Kavita Singh. Kavita Singh is the Chief Human Resources Officer of United Breweries. She is, besides doing a number of courses, our major thing is HR professional over 19 years, and she's got all international exposure, being now all the geographies, including Africa, Middle East, Europe, and subcontinent. So the right thing to talk today, and she has also held senior positions in many other leading organizations in the country. And very warm welcome to you, Ms. Kavita Singh. And let me have the privilege of introducing our next distinguished panel of jury. Jurajit Das is the Chief Human Resource Officer, ICICI Prudential Life Insurance Company, and he is also he has joined RPG Group in 1995 after graduating from XLRI, and worked in variety of RPG Group companies. And RPG is very close to us because MMA did a lot of work with Pradipto Mahapatra. We always remember him very fondly. We do a wonderful lecture in honor of instituted by Pradipto Mahapatra. He also assumed responsibility head of human resources in 2005, and his current responsibility is the functions head of resources, operations, customer thing, and IT infrastructure, and also CSR. Warm welcome to you, Mr. Jurajit Das. And we have another distinguished panel of jury with us. He is M.N. Rao, most experienced group head, human resource of CSR, L&T Hydrocarbon, and is again from XLRA Jamshedpur, a global C-suite professional across various sectors like manufacturing, engineering, and also a certified coach and president of Mumbai and Pune chapter of Coaching Foundation. He also has a senior position in pharma and a number of other companies, which gives us exposure to a number of HR issues in a great manner. Now I come to the most important person for this evening. Is our distinguished moderator for this evening, is Dr. Vasanthi Srinivasan, the professional OB and HR from IIM Bangalore. And Vasanthi is also an alumnus of XLRA Jamshedpur. She has served on publication to a number of organizations. And thank you so much. Very warm welcome to each one of you. And as I mentioned to you, all the viewers who have joined us this program live on Zoom, and also our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all other organizations. As usual, you're seeing the screen, the number which is flashed on the screen. Send your questions, and the distinguished speakers really wanted to interact and answer and attend all your questions what you have. And please restrict the questions relevant to the topic what is there today, because we are not here to tell you what medicine you should take during COVID. Please, because I keep getting, because we're all worried. You know, we want to ask, did you get COVID? What about? I have seen one of the questions, but I'm only telling. But today restricted to leadership, and because I know the culture, many of us we keep talking about it. Strategy, you know, the culture eats strategy for breakfast. I know what we are all having for breakfast today, but here the leader, we're going to take us through this, some of the important issues what you are going to face in leadership and culture, which is really dictating our. We are at the crossroad today and taking us forward. Over to you, Vasanthi, madam, and we're all eagerly looking forward to hearing some fantastic views from the great leaders who joined us as a distinguished panelists this evening. Over to you, Vasanthi, madam.
Thank you, Group Captain, and really appreciate the introduction as well as the warm welcome. Thanks, Ganesh, from the Coaching Foundation of India to just partner with this initiative, because I was just reflecting on it, and this is possibly the first time that in any of the panel discussions or conversations, I've seen the combination of culture and leadership. Yeah. It was interesting that when I was preparing for this session, I found Robert Kennedy's quote. And I'm actually going to begin with his quote and end with his quote because it seems so appropriate. Like it or not, we live in interesting times. They are times of danger and uncertainty, but they are also more open to the creative energy of men substituted by human than any other time in history. So in some ways, at this momentous time, when things around us are indeed shaping a new world order, there's been much that has been said and written about the pandemic. And I think for several years, impact on macro institutions, organizations, and individuals will continue to resonate. Okay, we don't know what the impacts are. However, what is it that we know from an ecological systems theory perspective is that individuals shape the culture just as much as culture shapes the individual. Before we begin this session, just to ensure, because I know that MMA has a very diverse set of audience, I just want to be sure that we all understand culture in the same way. So I am going to use the classic definition of culture, organization culture, that Edgar Schein in his book on organization culture and leadership defines. He defines culture as a pattern of shared basic assumptions that the groups learned as it solved its problems of external adaptation and internal integration. Okay, very important for all of us because culture is not static. Culture evolves. Just taking a basic definition of leadership as a process of influence, that's all. Then leaders influence culture, culture influences leaders, and it is in this creative tension that adaptation occurs. I have a request to participants because I've always found that participants are treated as passive listeners in the whole process. My request to you is that I think all the three panelists are going to share their experiences. Since both culture and leadership are observed and experienced, my request to each one of you as participants is listen to what the speakers are saying, because they may be able to articulate some of the dimensions of culture and leadership, but they may also leave a lot of them unsaid because it is experienced. So my request to you as participants is to connect and link to your own experiences of what has happened in these times. Okay. On that note, I am going to begin with a reflective tone and ask our panelists to look at the last year, the year that has gone by, and to look at what did this pandemic mean in terms of their organization and how they responded. What key actions did they take? How did they go about executing them? What kind of challenges and opportunities did the pandemic pose? I'm going to begin with requesting MVN Rao to begin. And Kavita, we will come to you after that. And Judhajit, you can close as the third panelist in terms of response. Okay, so maybe about 3 to 5 minutes, because this is the time that you're going to actually set the context as we deepen further in the next round of questions. Over to you, MVN.
Thanks, Vasanthi, and thanks MMA and CFI for having me in this panel discussion. Looking forward to an interesting conversation. You know, actually, Vasanthi, it's very interesting. The other day, I was looking at our analyst report that has come out post the finalization of the results of the company. One word struck me. They said that the world is not going to end with this. L&T is a practical example of that. So what he is trying to tell is that how do actually organizations look at these kinds of situations and how do they actually manage? And then they come out of this and, of course, come out as well as they can and also see what they have learned from it and build on top of that. But I was trying to reflect on that. And 12 months exactly, if you look back on it, I think somewhere in April, we started this journey of, we started with a Sampurna lockdown, whatever we called it. And the whole nation came to a standstill at that time. And then we moved to a stage, the second phase of it in somewhere in August to February, where we thought that we are generally coming out of that kind of a situation and we could get back our workplaces and the way we can do things. And as I see it, the third phase that happened was between March to what is happening today. Is something like it's like a bolt from the blue with respect to the second wave and what things happened where. When things happened the first time, I'm telling you, I think we as an organization, for the context setting, we are in engineering, procurement, construction, or what we call is a projects company. We finally earned money by doing things on the ground. And we earn money by doing things on the ground where thousands of people come together and turn the designs and the procurement into reality on the ground. So where we work, our context is we work in large parts of the world, especially in the Middle East, India, and rough terrains we work in. Actually, it is not, I may be speaking from Mumbai or some of our leadership team members may be sitting over here, but actually the story really goes on in the trenches of the countries where really the hard work and the rough terrain people need to meet and carry on with it. There are 3-4 things which really struck us, of course, in addition to many other things like going back home and working from home, and was something very new to us. I don't think Larsen & Toubro or our company was in the business of actually working from home. So we were always working in our campuses face to face and working together. And that's the kind of an organization we are. I'm not talking about our sister companies, the services part of the company. They were all more adept at these kind of things, but we were not in that business of it. So turning the organization digital and working from anywhere is a very interesting thing that we have experienced in the organization in the first phase. The second phase and the first phase of it, another important thing which we have noticed is that we had lakhs of people who wanted to go back home. And interestingly, if you notice the first phase, the number of cases we experienced were significantly higher in our overseas places than in India. And the biggest issue which we had was actually how do you move back the people from these overseas countries to India was a big challenge for us in those particular periods of time. And that was a big thing which kept us going. The second important thing was that as it was a very adaptive challenge, I don't think any of us have faced anything like this. We all talk VUCA, but I don't think there's nothing more than this as a VUCA really. So I think it was adaptive. We were trying to learn along the way. And the leadership was also participating in that particular thing of learning, unlearning, relearning. I think as the whole nation has been experiencing, nothing was a real solution and nothing was the solution of yesterday was going to work tomorrow. So that was the kind of a learning space that we went through. And in terms of the phase 2 was the resumption of the workplace for us. I think it's a very interesting kind of a thing. How do we convince people that the workplaces are safe and you can come back to work? And actually the amount of effort, that is where actually I realized as a HR, I became a lot more as an administrative expert. How do we run transports? How do we run green workplaces? How do you run masks? How do you make people responsible for their choices and the social distancing and so on? And practicing those things on an ongoing basis. That was actually the phase 2. And we almost reached a near 100% of our workplaces at the end of the phase 2, really. And suddenly the third one happened. The third one was actually, I would say, it was instilled a whole lot of fear, because I personally believe fear of life and fear of failure are the two major fears everybody encounters. But fear of life is something we talk about, but we really don't experience so much in our day-to-day lives. But this is something which is very close and staring in the face of the people, as I saw. And actually, there is a sense of despair and helplessness with respect to the dependence on the various inadequate facilities and the fear. But in that kind of a context, actually, we saw a fantastic opportunity of the organization stepping up and doing a variety of things to provide that kind of a psychological safety. Because actually, we believed as an organization, my simple definition, Vasanthi, of culture is the way we do things here. And way we do things here is that we run everything like a project. We are a projects company and we run things like a project. And we had an execution team and we had a distributed decision making. We had actually so many task forces formed in the organization. In fact, led to a little bit of confusion also along the way. But I think we could provide, be it in quarantine, be it in hospitals, be it in the communication that took place in the organization. I think there's a lot of effort that's gone in terms of that. But hopefully, I said we could meet some portion of our responsibility as a leadership and living up to the values and the culture which we propagate all over the place, saying that we as a company are here to stay and we care for our employees and they are here and that is why they are a pivotal power of the organization. How do we actually take all these things forward and then drive it kind of a story? I mean, there are many things are there, but I'm sure we can come back and talk about some of them along.
I really liked the way you classified the three stages and phases, and in some ways also kind of accentuated the concerns in each of those phases. I think that's quite insightful as we kind of go through the panel. Thanks, MVN. And Kavita, could I request you to again provide a canvas so that we can then go deeper in the next round?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Vasanthi. And a very good start. Actually, there's a lot of overlap in the kind of infrastructure that we experienced to what MVN explained. So, last year I was a part of the organization where we had almost 26,000 workmen of all categories. We had an infrastructure that was over 1 lakh plus with banks, schools, hospitals on the campuses. So of course, it brought a lot of administrative skills to the fore. But I think this was also a time where, especially for the organization that I was a part of, to actually test the culture and see how people from different quarters of the organization. So I'm not repeating the 3 phases that MVN has already highlighted, just the additional points. How each quarter of the employees actually reacted, leadership, decisiveness, thinking on the feet, not really waiting for instructions every time from the above, and also seeing, a very different component of the societal play. So for example, how the communities came to the forefront. So I will go deeper into that a little later. But in terms of the employees, I experienced that we were onboarding hundreds of people online, virtually, and this was also a brick and mortar company. Like MVN said, you dig from the ground, you process it, and you reach it out, and then you have all the ancillary power units and other things, the whole infrastructure that supports it. So you can't do it remotely. You can't mine metal remotely, or you can't process it. So what it meant was a drastic shift in how the workmen, the unions, and the community supported us. So in terms of project work, with the migration of the labor from other states, it posed a big challenge where the communities then stepped up. But it also had another dimension that once they support you, they also have a different ask. So that brought a very different dimension of how these communities, while they rise up, but they also then have a trailing effect in how we continue our relationship or associations with them. Coming to the employees, I mean, I experienced that the level of connect to the organization actually determined the kind of culture that got formed. So the level of connect was not proportional to the time or tenure spent in the company. It was more on how they had experienced the organization in terms of decision making, in terms of the support they had received at various stages of their career, and also the autonomy that people got in this space to actually display their leadership. So those were really good learning nuggets around that time. And of course, the first phase, like MVN described, we did not see much of an impact, because I think it still had to reach the deeper layers of the society for the pandemic to come. It's only now that we see it so up close and in very, very close proximity. So these were some things that came by. It also challenged every leader to be a people leader. It was something that you couldn't just be an operations leader. You had to be a people leader. You couldn't just be a planner or a geophysicist going down. You had to keep the human dimension at all levels. Then the other aspect was how for the leaders, when they look at being good people leaders, how do you make sure that your genuineness on the ground and virtually gets transmitted? Your connect either stays or deepens, so that you can really trust, because you can't really travel to many of these places. The other aspect was about how do you use the time in a structured manner that is now all of a sudden available with the people. So making sure that this is also a time to actually kind of refurbish some of the things. I'm talking towards the second half of phase 2 and phase 3, and more than that, how do you kind of see that your processes actually are augured well to handle a situation like this? I mean, we all have used or looked at basics in terms of IR, but some of those things had to be challenged. Even laws for specific industries had to be pushed back. So this machinery of the IR, the unions, the communities, I think this is one area where we saw a huge play in terms of the industry, where still going to the ground was important, making sure that you were continuing the operations to make the business run. And then, of course, I feel that from a cultural and leadership point of view, I feel that when you have thousands of people working, a culture is bound to be formed. Now, it's very important for the leaders to actually think that, do we control the culture, or the culture controls us? And from that point of view, I think the decisions that the leaders took, and the messages or the experience that the employees had through those decisions, translated into how they thought, how they felt, how they acted, and so on and so forth. So I felt this was a huge shift in how an organization was working in a normal state, and now when it got into a real tough situation, then how did they really bring that into forefront? So I think the importance of culture got really emphasized in that, and people were extremely genuine in terms of expressing the vulnerabilities that they experienced, whether it was family members. A lot of people who couldn't establish a connect with the company wanted to go back. A lot of people who have been with the company for a few years and felt a deep connect wanted to resolve and do something. There were people who just wanted to wait and endure and see what comes out of it and what's served out. So I think we saw different quarters of personal and leadership responses in that. I think that was a great opportunity, and of course responsibility to manage through.
Thank you, Kavita. Thank you so much. I think the key for me in what you said, and probably we will kind of have this resonating for a while, is the decisions that are made by leaders. And therefore, how does it impact? And I think it's interesting because one of the things that you beautifully also brought out is the intended and the unintended consequences. And you illustrated that so beautifully with the migrant labor and people from the community and everybody from the stakeholders stepping up. And then the unintended consequence of that is, in the future, there is a reciprocal expectation that the company will have to end up meeting. And it's beautiful because in a short time span, you've been able to kind of demonstrate that. And this is something that I think is worthwhile for all of us as leaders to think about, the intended and unintended consequences, especially when we are making a lot of these quick decisions and in a crisis context. And the other one that I want to leave, again, picking up with from what MVN said to your own articulation, I think the point of every leader being a people leader. And how do I transmit authenticity virtually? Yeah, and the last piece is, how have employee experience in the past that seems to have shaped significantly the employee connect during crisis? And I understand that it doesn't matter whether you're a permanent employee or migrant labor, you are anybody, but it seems to make so much of a difference. And I mean, that's something to just kind of think about. Thank you, Kavita. Thank you so much. Over to you, Judhajit. Your views, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor, and wonderful to be here this evening. So I think, like you said, I mean, MVN and Kavita have drawn a very powerful narrative of decisions taken by leaders and the responses by various employees depending on their connect. So I thought I'll take a step back and and look at it from a from what are the various trends that seem to be affecting us, because my inherent belief is, and I'm taking it from the first point you made about culture. Yes, culture is about the way we do things, but to me, culture is an outcome. And the outcome is fashioned by many forces, right? So if we want to take a step back and say, what are the forces that seem to be, in a post-pandemic world, what seem to be some of the trends and the forces that seem to be shaping our society? Because we are a microcosm of society and shaped by not just evolving consumer preferences, but also employee preferences and the future of work are all inextricably linked to some of these forces. So, of course, the first point I want to make is it's been a year of upheaval, a terrible upheaval, many challenges. And I think for the first time in my career, we have encountered death in many numbers. Yes, we've had issues of people falling ill, but there is grief in society as well. So we need to also recognize that. But the point I wanted to bring about is taking from the cue that MVN talked. 10 years back, we heard the word VUCA. Yeah, we had financial crisis 2009. There was the dot-com bust. So it's not that we're not seeing volatility and uncertainty, right? Some years there is some kind of, but this is the first time where people have experienced grief, illness, psychological insecurity. Yes, you lost jobs, but this is like much more deeper than that. So it is the visceral level it has impacted. Now, how it will pan out our reactions is something I'm raising as a question. It's not that I have answers to some of these, right? But the point I want to make is that yes, we are living in a world. If we thought that VUCA world will emerge once in 10 years, what the pandemic has taught us with the first wave and the second wave, that the VUCA world maybe every 6 months or maybe even a quarter. Now, the point is, it's like in my mind, how to cope with this. So the way I have rationalized to myself is like, it's like a roller coaster ride. If you are on a roller coaster, you might as well enjoy the ride, right? And I'm not saying it's easy. I don't want to trivialize it. But I'm saying that because none of us know how the future is going to pan out, right? So the question is, how do we manage in the present and mitigate the risks of the future? So I wanted to make that one point, that from a larger environment ecosystem, possibly, whether it's climate change, whether it's shorter viruses and all of these, whether it's different countries going, behaving like in the middle of a pandemic, can you imagine there is an Israel-Palestine conflict? It's absurd, right? And in the middle of we talked about, I'm not getting into the politics of it, but we talked about certain festivals that happened and the run up to the elections, which have been super spreaders. But even now, today, there is this issue of, a gathering of people. Where are we learning from this? So I don't know. I'm saying these are more questions in my mind. But the fact of the matter is, we are living in a world which is going to be volatile, which is going to be uncertain, which is going to be ambiguous, and a shorter cycle time. How do we respond from an organization? And that has implications for business continuity. So it has implications for product cycle times. It has implications for shifting consumer preferences rapidly, technological changes. I think it's getting amplified. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make in this is, in the first time in my career, I think the whole meaning of people first and safety of people, and not just physical. We always talked about safety of people from a physical health perspective. This is the first time we talked about mental health. It's out of the closet. We talked about anxiety. We talked about depression. We are talking about stress openly. That was unimaginable 1 year back. So somebody asked me these kind of issues. Yeah, rarely would we talk about it, but I think that's real. So that is something which is, I think, come out, and I think that's great, because that's something that will only fortify us going forward. And the point about individuals, in terms of, it's in my mind, the people first thing was also step up time for HR. Normally we always talk about HR as a support role. We talk about HR as a backroom role. This was a platform for HR to take leadership, right? And I'm glad that across organizations, the mettle of HR, of course, sanctioned by the values and ethos of the organization. I'm not for a moment saying HR operates in isolation. The senior management team, the CEO himself, the board, everybody rallied together for the cause of employees' health safety. And they looked upon HR to provide the solutions, whether it's about the logistics planning that Nvin talked about, or whether it's initiating policies. So it was a step-up moment for HR to play a leadership role, and I think HR did it with aplomb. So I don't think we should be ever having self-doubt about the role of that HR can play a leadership role in an organizational context, right? And I think that from a self-efficacy perspective and from the perspective of an opportunity to make a difference to organizations, I think it was a step-up moment for HR, and I'm glad that in most organizations, all progressive organizations, HR has risen to the challenge and demonstrated it with aplomb. So that's one more point I want to make. The next point I want to make is about what is there we are seeing around us. Definitely, everyone alluded to it in terms of digital adoption. We are seeing customers adopt digital because there's no other option. You can't go to face-to-face. You can't do face-to-face selling, or everything is now being done digital. Now, what does this mean in terms of the workplace, digital workplaces or hybrid workplaces? Again, I don't have answers. We don't know where it will settle. Will 70% of the people come back to office, or it will be 30-70, or is it 10-90? I have no clue. But definitely it will be a hybrid model. I can't see it disappearing away. No, this concept is not new. Even 20 years back, 25 years back, I remember we talked about, from a customer perspective, high tech and high touch. And fundamentally, my belief is that human beings are human beings. They need touch. Now, whether they need touch every day or they need touch once a month, that is yet to be seen. But definitely technology and human beings, the need, and because ultimately the workplace is a great place for, if I were to talk about your need for belongingness, you have to be part of a tribe, your identification. It is not possible in a virtual world to connect as effectively. That is, I think I can talk from my personal, now maybe I'm old school, I don't know. But even when I talk to my boys who are teenagers and ask them, would you like to go back to, they all want to go back to school. It's not that they're coping, but they want physical contact. And I think we should recognize that. And the value of physical contact in fostering many things. One of the things we talk about HR from we are a lubricant that reduces friction in organization functioning. Now, in a virtual world, my hypothesis would be friction would get amplified. So if you want to reduce friction, which actually, because the customer doesn't care for friction, the customer is only bothered about outcome. You need people to come together, and that has implications for aspects of what we say trust leading to collaboration, trust leading to innovation. So I don't know, in a hybrid world, how much innovation will happen beyond the point, or how much collaboration will lead to more friction, and all. Some organizations may die. Organizations will learn to cope, and therefore there is a, and we can talk more about that from a resilience perspective. But I think that could be a part of the next thing. I want to make one last point, which is really about the whole idea, and it's in a social context. Because one thing I'm realizing, we are living in a world of disinformation. You don't know what is the truth, and you don't know what is the right thing. People are yearning to trust. So the credibility, and I think one of the things I want to say, whether it's an organization, whether it's an individual, there is no substitute for personal credibility. So organizations which have not walked the talk, leaders who have not walked the talk, right? And I want to link it back to culture, because fundamentally, in my belief, while yes, culture is an outcome, it starts from the CEO, right? There is no ambiguity in my mind about it. You have the wrong CEO, you have the wrong culture. You have the right CEO, you have the right culture. All of us are part of a ecosystem that creates it. And therefore, it's some organizations which have stepped up with and supported their HR leaders to step up will definitely flourish. Organizations which have not, there will be erosion of their brand, whether from a customer perspective or whether from an employee perspective. And that I am very clear about, sitting where I am. So these are some of the points I thought I will want to make as a part of my starting remarks. And thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeet. I think the two things that kind of struck from what you said is amplification. I think that's an important one to keep in mind, because everything gets amplified in a kind of a virtual context, and several people are talking about it. The other one that I want to leave at this point in time, which has come across all of your presentations, is about the role of HR. Yeah. I mean, several times before the pandemic, people asked, who owns people? Yeah. And when you say HR owns people, because finance owns finance, so who owns people? HR owns people. Suddenly today, right, it's actually the truth around us. Yeah. For the participants, I just want to pause for a minute to tie in this particular opening round was really about providing perspectives. As you can see, they are really diverse. And in times of uncertainty, what do we know? Sense making is a key leadership capability. And one of the elements of sense making is the ability to look at varied perspectives. Yeah. Thanks so much to the three of you. And I'm just going to place a question. What was your biggest challenge, tension, paradox, thing that just tore you apart between culture, leadership, and practices during the last year? If you were to say, this is one thing that just kind of pulled us and it was such a challenge, what would it be? Yeah. Let me open to any of you, whoever wants to go, and then we can come back.
So I'll come in. So we are an essential service. And insurance, and our part of our vision statement, we also say that we want to be an enduring institution that serves the long-term protection and savings need of our customers with sensitivity. So at customer first is a value. Now, these are all nice sounding words, but what does it mean? It means that if you have to serve your customers' claims, or if a customer needs his money or her money, then you need to make sure your branch offices are operational, because every customer is not digitally savvy. So there is a conflict and there is a pandemic, and you are exposing some of your employees to the risks of the pandemic. Now there are two ways to, now one of the things is, at one level, there is a moral hazard. What if something were to happen to that employee? And if the employee were to catch COVID? And fine, hospitalized, we will take care of it. But there is this also lurking fear. And as we know, many cases of death also has happened. That weighs deeply on your mind. Like you asked the question, who owns people? It has been very clearly established HR owns people, of course, with line managers. There's no question about it. I'm not taking away the importance of line managers, but the need to create policy. People look up to HR to create policy. Policy implementation is done by the line manager. But what should be the policy? Who should we roster? Who should we not roster? So, of course, it has to be guided by certain principles. So, obviously, certain things, like if you're above a certain age, comorbidities, you will not roster them. You look at young people. How many times would you do? And also building a workplace. So, one of the things I think is, yes, there is a certain risk. You have to recognize the risk. But how can you mitigate the risk? And there are opportunities. So, whether it's putting plexiglass shields at office, making sure people are double masked, making sure that only customers are allowed only in batches, all the various things you can do. But the most difficult decision, since you asked about that, is really this balancing between what is the interest of the customer and what is the interest of the employee. And that is always the tension and because at the end of the day, if there is one death happening, you cannot as an HR head escape the moral responsibility of that death because it happened on your watch. And could you have done something about it? It does weigh on.
Yeah. Thanks.
Building on.
Go ahead, Em.
No, what he brought out, the expectations of the customers and the employees, what he brought out. Even within the employee sets, we have dilemmas. How does the leadership look at when you have, let's say, 60% of the people have to work physically on the sites? And how long would you allow, let's say, for example, people to work from the home? Where it's a very important dimension, if you understand the ethos of an organization or kind of a thing, we all used to work physically everywhere. The offices are there to support the sites, and sites are there to make sure that finally things get executed. So would this particular concept of a set of people working from home for how long? How soon should we bring them back to work and create a workplace and resuming of the workplace? It's a very important dilemma for the leadership to deal with in an organization. And second, immediately after that comes is that the paradox is that, how do I create confidence that the workplace is safe enough to work? And on one side, we are saying the dilemma is, okay, you conserve cash because there is nothing happening in the first quarter of the last year. There is no output going out. There is no earning in the organization, and you want to conserve cash. At the same time, to resume the workplace, you actually spend money. Like, let's say, for example, today I was speaking to my colleagues in Oman. Earlier, they were having 80 buses to bring people. Now they have 160 buses to bring people. Okay. So you're talking about increased cost, increased spends, and to resume workplaces. At the same time, you also have employees who ask the question, why are you doing all these things? Why I can't continue where I am and I'm comfortable over there? Why you have to do that? So there is a very interesting dimension, but how do you convince, communicate, and how does the leadership also does that on an ongoing basis? So basically, I think that's also a very interesting dimension, a paradox we need to deal with. While one side you said conserve cash. Another interesting dimension is that large organizations who have always worked, you manage what you saw. And suddenly you have empty places and you have people not even on the videos anymore. They are only on calls and you have hundreds of people on that. And then suddenly you discover there are lacuna in the way we measure, lacuna in the way with respect to how do we actually employ various kinds of people. And large organizations usually ended up getting padded up. You suddenly start discovering the employee productivities and the need for the numbers and the cost suddenly become very prominent for everybody. So that's a very important leadership action that we need to take as we go forward. I think these are all all the balls are in the air. One is the health of the people, the safety of the people, the work that has to go on, the customers' expectations that the projects have to go on. We are already spending money and things are not happening. At the same time, spend more money to bring them people back inside. At the same time, communicate that we are empathetic and make sure that we also care for you and your safety is most prima facie important to me. At the same time, I care and I do it. And also, it's your choice in the sense that individual employee also take accountability, because if he doesn't wear a mask and if he goes around into crowded places, how do you ensure that to put some accountability onto the people concerned? So there are a lot of paradoxes. And at the same time, what Jude has brought out very clearly, I think the people ownership and the policy ownership, through the policy ownership, how does actually the entire drive of the people management and creating that entire capacity in the managers to manage. Well, I don't think we are a company who does frequent check-ins every day morning with everybody. We are a very decentralized, empowered kind of an organization. Suddenly that the kind of uneasiness when you don't know what is happening and you want to actually frequent check-in, and you see there is a slight culture and there is a kind of resistance which you notice amongst the people. There are a lot of softer issues that you need to deal with as we go forward. And I'm sure we are dealing with it and we are building on it. But at the same time, we feel hopeful that the lot of learnings and opportunities which we have gathered along the way will hold us in greater stead as we go forward.
Yeah.
Great. Kavita.
Yeah, I just want to add to both of them. The two things that actually kind of kept us awake was one, when do you stop and when do you start? That was a big decision because it has, of course, it's a trade-off. It has repercussions on the continuity of operations, and I also felt that this was the first time when safety and continued operations became oxymorons. So one had to exist and one didn't have to for some time at least.
Correct.
And and of course that was one. But safety of people, when you are asking hundreds and thousands of them to come and work, it was a big moral responsibility, asking them to come and the trust that they place in you and they come and they turn up. I think to live up to that trust is really, really important.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for that wonderfully candid responses. And the reason why I'm saying this is because there is a lot of research which actually says that there are moments of truth in organizations. These are defining moments where leaders have to make a decision between right and more right. Any idiot can make a decision between right and wrong. When you have to make this between right and more right, with a moral hazard and what is the price of a life? Yeah, when you have to keep those questions in mind and you're making decisions, those actually change and alter the culture of organizations forever. So whether we did it mindfully, whether we did it consciously, and sometimes it might have just got taken out of our hands when we have to make those decisions, each one of these defining moments impact culture. And therefore, the leadership decisions and the link to culture for the participants, I hope you are now able to see the key idea of this session in terms of culture and leadership. Thanks so much. And I am just mindful of the time. And what we are going to do is in this phase, in the next 20 minutes, we are going to be looking at what do we see happening over the next, I don't know whether to call it a year, 2 years, but in the foreseeable future. let's just look at the kind of experiences that the panelists have shared. And the question is, what do you think are the key issues that are going to surface as you look at the immediate future? Already, Jeet, you threw up some of those hybrid workplaces as the new norm. All of you consistently spoke about the more nuanced qualities of leaders, whether it is in being seen to be authentic, as Kavita mentioned, or whether it is in fostering trust, Jeet, that you mentioned, or whether it is in the way leaders engage and be seen as just, that MEN was talking about. So there are obviously the subtler dimensions. And then, of course, there is the third element that all of you spoke about, which is the fact that we don't know when it is going to end, and therefore the constant need to go back to re-examine many of the decisions that we have made as we keep going. Yeah. So those are some of the thoughts pertaining to the future that we are already able to see. Yeah. Often people ask us to crystal gaze into the future. And I just want to let the participants on this webinar know that in times of uncertainty, it's not crystal ball gazing, but your hindsight and perspectives of others who have that kind of experience that allows you to deeply look at some insights. And it is this insight which helps you to gain foresight. Okay. So if you look at Bob Johansen, futurist, he actually talks about being a futurist as not as getting things right, but it is about the number of times that some things that I have said are patterns that have emerged. So I'm going to request the three of you to kind of reflect and just give some tentative pictures of what do you see occurring in terms of work, workplace, worker, culture, leadership over the next few months, quarters, years. MVN, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, I've been thinking about what happened from the first phase to the second phase. Has something changed? I mean, it did change, but I thought we gained. We gained a new way of doing things. That is our digital rot. I think if we were saying that if the experiment of doing work digitally, if we were at 10 on a 10-point, 100-point scale, we would have moved up to 70 by the end of the phase one. So I think the entire adoption has reached that kind of pace. So that is going to stick to the company. So that is whether we do it hybrid or some roles here and there or whatever it is, that proportions will keep changing along the organization. That's going to stick. Second one is that the health component, what Jude talked about. Today we talk about safety. I think health and the environment, I think will take a very huge precedence in the conversations at various senior management levels in the company. That I see is clearly happening. And another very important thing which I believe will happen is actually the employee experience using digitally. I mean, the HR itself will revisit many of their way of doing things because of the kind of people who will come to work. Because I have a feeling all those things that we talk about, whether it be the gig workers, part-time workers, people who will do different kinds of things, I think already was there in small proportion, but it will take precedence and take a larger dimension as we go forward. So the entire HR, the way of doing things for the different kind of people who work for the companies and how we evolve the policies, procedures, and how we work on that, I think that will take precedence as we go forward. And the leadership itself, I think one good thing that has happened is that it is not actually one person who knows answers to everything. I think the entire thing about collectively sense making, which happened through this period, I think some of it sticks to the people and the leaders, and the organizations will become a lot more participative in a big way and involving, and where everybody is empowered to make decisions and actually drive things at their respective levels. That's another thing that will stick around in my view as we go forward. And of course, as we view, the purpose of our organization has not changed. We still make those things that have to happen. So whether that workplaces will change, I doubt very much whether it will change big way. But there will be things which will come and help us to become more productive, more people friendly, more people focused, and more amount of leadership, which is actually empathetic, collaborative, and also making and taking people along in making sense out of the so-called as we go forward. I think these are some of the things which I see. I think as a positive, I sense after this entire turn the round bend, when all the rough road is over, I think we will be, in a better shape as we look forward. I think that's how I see the, whatever little I have sense of what will happen actually.
Thanks, MVN. Over to you,
And
Kavita.
of course, I think we all hope that we all get our vaccinations done by the end of the year.
Sure.
And so we will put this little behind. With a double mask, we can get on with life, I guess.
Thank you. Over to you, Kavita.
Yeah, it will be, I think, of course, adding to what MVN has said, it's also important that, there will be a lot of changes expected going forward once we return to normalcy. A lot of industries have seen a proof of concept in terms of productivity, efficiency. So that will be a hard reality that will hit us. The second is, I think, from an HR professional point of view, I think it will be very important as the skill of, again, I'm emphasizing on that, because in a plant or manufacturing setup, the IR skills will I think will get back into demand, because once you start getting the involvement of the local communities around, it is very important that those skills are sharpened and you are able to deal with the repercussions of these 2 years or whenever it ends, and get things back to normal. So how do you leverage your collective powers as an organization or units that are dependent on the workers that surround the localities? That's one dimension. The third one is, again, I think I like the thing that Jeet said, that there is no alternate to personal credibility. So I think the genuineness and authenticity with which people will lead, either through a screen or in person, I think will continue to be what will inspire people to stay or fly off from an organization. So these will be some of the important things, but I know that for a services industry it could mean different. For a brick and mortar industry, it will mean that digitization and adaptation, innovation has sped up, and people have seen very, very good alternatives of manless operations. But then that will also mean, what other options do you create for the societies that you're operating in? You may be exploiting or using their resources, but then what do you give back in return? Which means the corporate social responsibility angle will really kick in and say that what do you give back to the communities that you operate in? So these are some of the thoughts that I would leave with.
Thanks, Kavita, especially the last point that you said. And that's something for all of us to reflect, because if anything in the last year we have seen is that the role of the traditional actors, whether it's the government, the civil society, the private sector, I think has just so altered in ways that it's going to take us a long time to fathom. Yeah, whether it is about running the CCCs or whether it is about the PPEs. I mean, it's just brought in a new form of collaboration and work that we have to go back and kind of really reflect on it. And what does this mean to our primary roles of organizations as creating value for our stakeholders? And will the digitalization mean that we create greater value or lesser value in the communities around which we operate? Great point. Over to you, Jeet.
Okay, so I think MVN and Kavita, I agree and resonate with whatever they have said. And if you look at the discourse, but I wanted to emphasize the point on the people focus, because if you look at the discourse, it's and people when sending a text, it is now the done thing to first check are you safe and well? I hope you are safe and well. That's the first thing you ask. You cannot ask for a task. It will be seen as insensitive, whether the task has got completed or not. So I think in a sense, the norms of conduct are changed to what MBA talked about, a more empathetic kind of leadership, a more participative kind of leadership. And checking in with team members. So in a sense, I think at a broader level, if you want to call it, could it lead to more humanizing the workplace? I think it will, right? And in that context, my thought would be not just humanizing the workplace more, because somewhere work had become very transactional. And technology makes work very transactional. I think to that extent, some of these, sometimes it brings back that fact fundamentally that we're human. Second point I want to make about that, I believe that, with whether it's digitization or the fact of, some of these norms changing, will become a more inclusive workplace. One, probably because of the fact that two things. One, the ability to work from home or work digitally will allow, many more women not to opt out of the workforce because they will have the flexibility that they need. It will also give flexibility to people with disabilities. Right? If commute is, and in Indian society, one of the big problems is that even if an organization wants to provide, you don't have buses, you don't have cars. I mean, you need an attendant to bring you to work, right? So we are not geared as a society, and we don't have the resources of a Western society to provide all this. Now, but potentially, if you're working from your comfort of your residence, I can give you work. So I think we'll become a more inclusive and a more diverse workforce. I think that would be something that I think would be something to look forward to if I have to crystal gaze. The third part, which is more a question in my mind, but I'm definitely looking at it, not from a... See, the whole question is, what is the role of the hierarchy in adding value to how work gets done? Because value creation always happens, in our service business, by the person who's the frontline, the customer facing role, whether it's the customer service person or actually the frontline sales guy. Every layer above that, right? How is that layer adding value is going to come up for questioning, because earlier you could justify, you are doing these physical meetings, rewards and recognition activities physically. Now, when you do digitally, you can do 100 people at the same time, right? You don't have to travel around the country to do it. You're doing it digitally. Today only we were talking about learning programs. I said the concept of a batch for training is gone. Earlier we would think about, if you don't have 20 places because people would come from different places, you have to create that batch. Logistics planning for training was such a big thing. Now the batch concept is gone. You can do as many training programs as you want technically, potentially. Right? And you can also give it in many doses, 2-hour bite-sized learning. So many opportunities. The flexibility is enormous. So in my mind, it has a big question in terms of organization design. And therefore, I would believe that organizations will become more delayered. And that would also lead to faster transmission, because the value addition by each level of the hierarchy is now, in my mind, very suspect. And because the traditional job of the manager in terms of coordinating, controlling, organizing, planning, is all technology tools can do that. And frankly, that will lead to more empowerment, which is great for customer and great for the organization. So I think the question would be, people have to reinvent themselves. If you're just a people manager without specialist skills, you cannot. I think the era of just being a good manager is going to go. Either you have to bring value from a cognitive perspective, your decision-making perspective, your judgment perspective, or you have to have some skill. You cannot be only being an aggregator of roles and just being a bit better. It will not work. I think the organizations will not have tolerance for it. So I think if I were to think, these are some of the trends I would definitely think that would emerge over a period of time.
Thanks so much. I think one of the things that I'm hearing from all the three of you is the fact that some of the trends had actually begun before the pandemic. Yeah. Before the pandemic, digital transformation was already deepening. Before the pandemic, the kind of questions that were being asked by large organizations is the value of each level of leadership. Even before the pandemic, as organizations were looking at automation and human machine learning and all of that, I think the message was already coming through that there are a lot of routine processes, ways of working that needed to be challenged. Role definitions were already evolving. So in some ways, if we look at the two key differentiators that the pandemic brought into a way or into a future where already things were beginning to change, I think the first one that all of you have spoken about is the humanizing of the workforce. Yeah, humanizing of managers, leaders, empathy, health, things, well-being, all of these, which we kind of went to the back because we were so transaction oriented. I think that's kind of come. And what does this mean when we are actually looking at the traditional culture of a deep profitability short-term orientation that was dominant? Will that change? How much that will change? How far that will change is one question that I'm just going to leave for us to think about. The second one that is important within this, and possibly just one or two questions around this, is what do you think this will do to governance? Will it change fundamentally what's happening in terms of governance, the role of the board, the role? Any thoughts on that between the three of you?
I'll take a stab at it, Professor. So one of the things I'm noticing when in all investor meetings, right? So wherever you get on an investor call, there are lots of questions about COVID and employee safety also. That is investors only talk about margin and growth. So that piece itself is quite heartening again. Now, so what it is also leading to, I guess many of you would be familiar with the concept of ESG funds, environment, social governance, right? And so today, if you look at it, ESG funds are becoming very popular. Companies, listed companies are getting their ESG reports. You're getting scored on it. There is pressure on responsible investing, pressure on governance. I think there has been, and not just driven by climate change, but the whole aspect of governance, social, which is about human capital, which is about data privacy. All of these have come to the fore. So you cannot just be oblivious to it. So you have to respond. You have to seem to be responding. You seem to have initiatives which are doing it. And these are questions. And today there are investor conferences on only ESG, right? Every organization, if you don't publish an ESG report, right, you're being questioned. And there is chances your market cap, which is going back to the fundamental issue, if you do not demonstrate. So I think there has been definitely a big shift. And I'm certainly seeing the shift over the one. So the point you made, Professor, about that, have these trends been there? Yes, they've been there. But what has happened is there is an acceleration. That acceleration. So it's not that we did not have remote workplaces. It's not that we didn't have employee health and safety. They were moving at a course, but suddenly there is an avalanche. And I think that's the point to be noticed. And I wanted to make one point because I think somewhere one of the people in the chats had put, and I wanted to put 2 points there linked to that. So one is the question on who owns people, right? I think the limited point is the proposition is not to say that HR only owns people. I never meant that. I think the point is HR has a role to create policy. Now you can do crowdsourcing of policy. That's wonderful, but that's assuming business as usual. When you're in an emergency, there's a crisis, somebody has to take decisions. Now you cannot go and ask every employee, every functional leader to decide how policy should be, right? So therefore you need an anchor point, which is HR, which is about owning the people from a perspective that somebody has to anchor that, has to coordinate and close it and ensure its communication happens, because that is the role. And I think one of the points I want to make is it's also not just about HR stepping up to a leadership role. I think the point I want to make, and Ganesh in his book had talked about HR as a helper, right? The service nature of HR has been amplified. If you're not there to help people in their time of need, right? In that time of need, because this is the time to really step up, isn't it? If you're not there to help people in the time of need, whether at an individual level or whether at an aggregate level, either through policy or even as an individual, as a human-to-human interaction, the question is, what is the human resource function for? Will come into question. So I think it has also brought about the dimension of HR, the power of a service, the power of the helper in an organizational context, and how important it is to have a role which actually links up different parts of the organization together and provides the psychological security, not just the physical security, because it's all about psychological security. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeet. Anyone else? Kavita, MVN, you want to go on that question on governance? Any experience?
See, Vasanthi, I think as you noticed, I think governance is quite mandated and very well. I think the disclosures, the way things have changed in the last 8 to 10 years, I think is stupendous. Whether be it ESG, whether be it your disclosures on various counts. And one is to do it like a letter and do it in the spirit. Like some of those kinds of things, what I think Jude was talking about, is bringing in that additional focus in. The very fact that an investor is talking about people. Otherwise, I don't think in any investor call I've heard before, somebody is asking what is your safety or what is your health or something like that. I've never seen that before. But that's something with a huge change that's taken place.
Yeah.
Of course, ESG funds are very, very important because ESG score is very important for pension funds to put money into organizations, and various FPIs keep looking at that data. And organizations are start behaving and believing that whether be your ESG, CSR, and all those things are also very important to demonstrate what kind of a corporate citizen you are. And the most important thing is that humanizing the workplace and bringing that agenda to the forefront. And largely, I think that a very beautiful point which Jude made about helping profession. I don't know about HR professionals today, but HR professionals of my era, my time, I think have chosen to come into this field because of the many times the opportunity to be of help. Whether you become a coach or you become a HR person, to largely is to provide that kind of a help and support wherever it is required kind of thing. And I think this particular 1 year period has significantly brought out that element. You can do the job like an administrative expert, but you can do it with empathy. You can do it with that kind of authenticity and being there for the people. And role modeling that aspect which Jude brought about, I think that was a tremendous opportunity it gave to the HR professionals. And he has said it very rightly. I think they have come out with aplomb. When I listen to many of the HR professionals, I think the way they have came out with respect to what all the things they did, awesome things and amazing things that they have created for the social psychological security and safety of the employees all over the place. I think that's something which is, I mean, we can write reams about it once the whole dust settles down and see what we have done around that. But right now in the midst of the action, so I'm sure this particular kind of an opportunity helps us to look at the rear view mirror, but there are lots of things that have been done and good things and which we can be proud of too.
Thank you. Thank you. Kavita?
Yeah, just one dimension I wanted to add that, not just the employees or the shareholders or investors, but I think with the onset or the accelerated use of technology to conduct your everyday business has also given a voice to the vendor or receiver of your services. So it is as easy for the receiver of your services to actually question, ask for more your transparency. So I think, of course, the organizations are becoming more and more transparent with their reporting and everything, but the right to question has also gained prominence is something that I wanted to highlight. You see it in the schools, you see it in institutions, you see it in non-profit setups. Yeah. You also see it in profit setups and listed entities. So there is a right of asking that has become extremely high in terms of occurrence is what I'm seeing. People are asking.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kavita. I think, and that's such a powerful note to kind of look at wrapping up this session. I think the first, because voice is so essential for transparency, and transparency is key in terms of how decisions are made and communicated and how do people understand. Yeah. And there's just so much that has been spoken about on transparency and its relationship with authentic leadership in organizations. So I think the first key takeaway that we are able to see from all the conversations is that, yes, leadership is changing. The nature of leadership is changing. How dramatic, how significant, how different, We've heard different perspectives to it, but clearly leader behaviors of the future are going to demand certain kinds of competencies, which, while they exist today, are going to get accentuated. Growing from there, and the point that all of them have said, the tone gets set at the top. So if leader behaviors are changing and as individuals, leaders are transforming, it is inevitable that that manifests and interacts with the context that they are experiencing. And it is inevitable that it will influence the norms, the ways of decision making, extent of empowerment. All of this, coupled with digitalization that is pushing it, is actually going to call for more flatter, more open forms of organization. So many times from each one of you, I've heard the word psychological security. Yeah. To me, that's the key word in terms of how you look at it, because the way you think changes when you put somebody else's psychological safety at the center. Last but not the least, what is asked, what you measure gets done. We know it. So if the boards and governance start calling out on the S, E, and the G, automatically the rest of the organization, its tone, its ways of work, and its culture will indeed change. As I kind of close the panel discussion and hand over for the chat, Group Captain, I just need 1 minute at the end to wrap up after I listen to the Q&A. Okay, over to you, sir, to moderate this session.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great insight, and glad to share with you. Over 1,900 people are watching this program live from all our social media portals, and there are a number of questions that come the chat box which you are viewing yourself, and also on YouTube and Facebook. I will try and think, and I will request that this could be a rapid fire question, so that we'll try and accommodate as many questions as possible. And as usual, the privilege goes to the president of MMA to ask the first question. May I request Ravi, please, can you please share your questions? And you can also mention to whom the questions are addressed. Otherwise, we can leave it to the general open-ended. Over to you, Ravi.
Oh, thank you for that privilege. So my question is, one of the learnings we have as a company is that we are seeing a lot of self-managed teams perform far better in crisis. And, we have kind of come to a conclusion that holacracy as a potential structure could be a futuristic thinking in terms of organizational structures. What's your take on this?
I'll take a look at it. Ravi, self-managed teams, we have been talking about it for quite some time, actually. And in various automobile and many other places which we have seen it in the past, where without any supervisor, how do the teams come together and have quality circles and groups and so on and so forth. And we have noticed this where the work is of a very highly skilled nature, and they themselves, the senior most amongst the workmen, manages that particular process. We have seen that coming to fruit in many places, and especially I have noticed this in all my overseas sites largely. Because what we realize is that each one comes with a very specific set of skill. And if you form the gang properly and make sure the charge hand or the senior workman comes together, the role of a supervisor or the source line manager becomes more like a facilitator who provides the kind of resources and support. And we saw that working out quite well for us. And then I think it is only a question of taking that forward in many other places. And we feel that it's a way I think we can try out in many places too. That's what I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. And now let me move to the chat box. I'll keep shifting between chat and also the social media portals. Here is a question from Suresh. There's many in the YouTube also are similar questions. Physical work in office, also socializing aspect, while in the entire work can be done from home digitally. Social factor, work from home, bring in a fatigue which can take away by the office atmosphere socializing. This I also felt quite a bit in MMA. Many people wanted to come and do the event in MMA with the hybrid event. So how do you handle such a situation as your work affected seriously because of working from home, and where many issues could have been resolved when you are face to face. And what's your experience on this? Would like to know, Mr. Rao?
Yeah, I think we are a work from office kind of a company, so I should actually take this question.
Yes, please.
You see, what happens is that as a company which is in the process of actually doing an EPC contractor, or what we call as the EPC construction company, the design, the procurement, the installation, commissioning teams largely, they work together in the same office. So actually people walk across and then it gets resolved, many of the problems along the way. And of course, I think to certain extent, that kind of spontaneity that goes on in when people sit together in task forces and work together is reduced to some level of it. But people have adapted to it, because actually you have in various kinds of technology forums now, you can create virtual groups of the same thing and you can work together. But even I think if I want to talk to you, I set up a conversation with you. I mean, I can't just call up the kind of a person, kind of a story. But then what we realized is that the networking significantly drops. What we realize is that when I look at my network analysis, I seem to network with only the same 30-40 people regularly. What used to happen in the past, when I used to walk around and I used to meet many more people in the organization, that has actually taken a little bit of a backbone. Whether it impinges on my productivity, whether it is actually affecting the kind of transactions I do, I think I need to look at it as we go forward. But there is certain amount of, it is a sense of getting used to it, and sense of actually working together and also missing it. There's an old saying, I think I would like to take a minute to tell you about that. There was a time when people said the old type of offices are not the right thing, where we had cabins and people sitting outside, and open plans are better. Now there is a big school of coming back saying that that is not the right way to motivate people, because people are not being very, very free and relaxed in open offices when the bosses are also sitting there. So actually there is a going back to the old ways of doing things and all that. So I think there is no one right way, I say, but I think it's a good new thing which we have learned working from home or anywhere, and that is going to coexist along with the hybrid way of working environment. I think it's going to add to our repertoire of delivering better output to the end customer by bringing this into our workplaces.
I would also add that technology will play a big part, and consciously leaders or colleagues will have to make an effort to connect. So, you see new versions of Outlook which automatically put breaks and then connect. There are new technologies where you bring in more transparency to your availability during the office hours and things like that. So I feel technology will be of great help, but a conscious effort to connect will be the key.
Anybody else to add, or shall we move to the next question, sir? Okay, I'll move to the next question. And Mr. Diljit, you already answered this question in the chat box. Something similar has come in the YouTube too. That is question to you, that HR want people and people want people. And one of the person YouTube asked relevant to this is, yes, people want people. And how do you make people want the organization? And the people who have the sense of belonging and entrepreneurship, that they own the organization, many issues which you face will get resolved. How do you bring in this cultural change in your organization? And each one of you, could you share what initiative you have taken from your side to bring this cultural change that people own the organization and they belong to them?
Yeah, so so the classical ways that you do it, the organization has a strong purpose, right? If there is a strong purpose, people identify with the purpose, then automatically you feel much more invested in the success of the organization. That is, I think, and it's important for organizations to define that purpose. It's not just a vision statement on the wall that you put up. It's also about cascading it, explaining it, and then people have to, at some level, also believe in it, right? And that is the job of not just HR, it's for all leaders. HR is only, again, holding it together from a employee communication perspective, but ultimately, like we talked about culture, right? It only becomes culture when everybody talks the same language, right? If it's just another vision statement on the wall or purpose on the wall, and people see, and it's also important. You cannot also say that quality is important, but actually don't care about quality. Or service is important and actually create products which are actually not good for customer, right? So people are watching. I think what we have to understand is, if the adage was that everything that you do, walking the talk, I think has become even more important. So the point that I talked about credibility, from the CEO onwards down to every leader, you are being watched every day. And whatever you do is being judged. So I think that is one point I wanted to make. Linked to that is the other aspect, in terms of when we talk about how do you get, organization citizenship behaviors. I think fundamentally in my mind, my learning is the perceived fairness part of it. Stacey talks about it, right? The question of, do people perceive the organization is fair and transparent in its policies? If you have ad hoc, if you have an adhocracy, you cannot have fairness. So that is why the need for rules, systems, policies also come, because it gives a certain, anchor. I mean, there will always be an exception, but fundamentally, if you, so that point that was made about this whole debate of centralization, decentralization, right? And it's a good question. How much do you centralize? How much do you decentralize? In a crisis, can you totally decentralize? Yes, at times, because at the end of the day, things do move faster. But at the end of the day, if there is one right answer to a problem, and different people are doing different things. So I'm not trying to say what model will work every organization, every leader, because it is context dependent. Because my fundamental belief is every organization, every situation is context dependent, linked to the kind of people there are. So whether it's self-management teams or hierarchy also works in certain situations. The military is a hierarchy, and it is definitely a very, very effective machine. So whether the military machine can produce innovation in a commercial context, that is a different question altogether. So I think we have to be very careful about what question we are trying to answer. We cannot also say that one model is the answer and the panacea to everything. So to go back to the point you made, I think getting people invested in the organization requires, in my mind, if I have to pick up two things, I would say the aspect of perceived fairness and connecting at a deeper purpose or the vision of the organization, I think would be the two most important things in my mind.
Thank you.
I'll just add one point to that. As a company which has been long standing, what actually brings people to us and believe that people stay back with us? I think one particular thing which we notice, every organizational purpose attracts the kind of people it needs to get it. I mean, if you are a worthy engineer who wants to do things, we believe that we are an organization for that. And second one, as I think Jude has said, is that does the organization has that, does it invest in people? Does it invest and grow people? And does it actually treat with them fairly over long periods of time, which actually all said and done, finally, every organization is a package deal. You get something good, something not so good, but I think people make their decisions on the basis of what suits them in the end. And they believe that this is the time or a place where they would like to invest themselves and become a part of the organization. I mean, easier said than done. It needs to be built over periods of time by leaders and everybody together. And you have to walk the talk. I mean, when we say that many of the young people who join the company have become board members, like some of the organizations do and others represent, I think it's a way of demonstrating that you come, we invest, we grow, and then you become a part of it and you lead the organization. I think the real life examples of that, I think, also act as the poster boys to bring more people into the picture and so on and so forth. That's what I think, to other point. But many other practices are required, and it's a big story by itself. Another panel discussion perhaps for that.
Thank you so much. Here is a question from Raghuveer from Jabalpur. He wants to know how organizational culture shapes reactions to the workers with disabilities and others who are demographically different. Does the cultural diversity have a negative effect on the team performance? And did you face difficulty while, especially when the people are working from home? It's quite difficult for some of the people with disabilities to really, live up to the expectation of the organization. How do you balance between these two expectations of the organization vis-a-vis the difficulties being faced by the employees because of certain inherent disabilities that they have?
I can take that.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I have seen that in most cases, the diverse mix of people with different abilities actually brings more empathy and awareness in the teams around. I have seen people stepping up to say that there is appreciation for what one has, and there is an appreciation for what one can do for the society. So that is there. However, in terms of working remotely, I have of late experienced that there is an equal contribution expected from everybody when other factors are not at play, like being physically present or anything like that. But it also depends on what kind of infrastructure and a contribution system that one creates. So a lot of teams have created these norms that this is the way work has to be distributed. And in some places, I think just the fact that you've had a privilege or an advantage for some time has given the responsibility for people to step up and start contributing equally. But there is an expectation to contribute equally, is what I've seen.
Thank you. Here is a question from Rajashri from Pune. What you want to know is that how do you empower women, especially during work from home? We have come across cases women really suffer domestic violence and they're not able to cope up because they not only have to manage work from home, manage the office requirement, manage your house, manage your children. Sometimes that's happened, and that's your company taking some initiative to really inculcate to protect these women who really do suffering, at the same time contribute to the success of your organization and live up to your expectations.
We have what we have done is two things. One is, of course, through an employee assistance program, provided a set of legal advice to some of these cases that have come up. Second is, what has really helped more than the legal advice is the group help. So when you live in communities working in the same office, there's a lot of social or perceived status that people are exhibiting. So it's very important that that aspect is kind of made use of. So we have created women councils at every location, and that has helped, which has over a period of time helped them to open up about issues that they have faced, and help has been reached out at the right time. And we have seen many cases where this was helpful. So small groups at a local level have helped a lot.
Would you like to add something, or shall I move to the next question? Okay, I'll Mr. Rao, would you like to add?
No, more or less similar to what Kavita has talked about, providing support, providing a listening forum, providing those social groups where they can actually share their stuff, and of course the counseling support and the mental health support that we provide to them. I think
also what has helped is the there is even if they're working, most of the women are not financially independent. They don't plan their finances. They don't take care of certain things, which is one dimension that we have worked a lot on. So, even though you're working or you're a part of a joint family or whatever, it is very important that you don't still leave, the reins in someone else's hand. You have to be self-dependent. You have to have certain degree of freedom or a choice to exercise when it comes to certain aspects of life. So that awareness setting is also very important.
There's also a question, one of the speakers is come from Pondicherry, Raman. What you want to know is, you mentioned about empathy and also bringing in the people get involved in organization growth. And they want to know that today, the one thing which you're going to say to them is, yes, wearing mask and social distancing, but vaccination is very, very important critical aspect. What initiative your organization taken to make sure that every employees, even the employees, because you take care of employees alone doesn't matter. If somebody in the family to get infected, is going to have a serious impact on the employees. What initiative measures you think your organization taken, and what's your word of advice that every organization? Because I know Suresh Raman is supposed to join us and deliver the welcome address. He couldn't join because Tata Consultancy Service has been tasked to really vaccinate almost 500,000 people of the Tata Group, and he's running a pillar to do that. What is your organization initiative on this line to make sure the vaccination is being done to every single employee of your organization, later every family member of the organization?
Actually, I think what every organization is trying to do the same thing, like us, we have formed a task force, including a couple of board members of ours, to actually make sure vaccination becomes available to all our employees and their families. We have almost around 2.5 lakh people across various sites and various other, including family members and all. It will be a big story. So in fact, the entire organization, after this second hiccup we had between April to May 15, as the sliding scale is showing that little less number of cases as we see now. I think the entire focus of the organization is largely about making it vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. Buy it, take your own appointment, go to the public health, get your camps organized in all your sites where you have projects. I mean, using every possible means so that you make sure that you make the organization vaccinated.
So I'll add just another point to that, which is that our premises, the government allows the office premises to be used for vaccination. It's easier for factories, but when you tie up with service providers, like whether it's a Manipal hospital or Apollo or whichever, Fortis, Max, or even you need municipality permission. The advantage of doing it in office premises is you can manage the crowding, because if you go to a hospital, obviously there are many people there and there is a chance of people getting infected. So wherever we have significant numbers, we are also, we have got the permissions from the municipalities. However, as you know, vaccine supplies are still not fully there. Hopefully in the next 1 or 2 weeks, it will ease. And then you'll be able to vaccinate at scale in the office premises. But more importantly, like, it should manage the logistics in a manner that you will ensure that there is no overcrowding that happens. So chance of infection is minimized. That's all.
Great.
And extend it to, of course, family members and as well.
Yeah, Dhruti, there's again question addressed to you, Mr. Dhruti. There is the relation in relation to the customers. This pandemic also a turnaround time of clearing the insurance dues and payment of surrendered policies have not reduced. So what is the leadership action being taken? But I don't think it's related to leadership and empathy. I think I should skip this question because I want to take your permission. You would like to answer, I leave it to your choice, Mr. Dhruti.
No, I can say for the benefit of the public as such, yes, because so what happens is definitely we are prioritizing COVID-related claims. So our effort is to make sure COVID-related claims get, and the regulator is also monitoring us. Daily we send a report on COVID-related claims to the regulator in terms of how much time. So just to give everybody a context, of most claims get settled in 1 day, and most insurance companies do that also. However, if the documentation is not in place, or there is what is called a field investigation required where we need to ascertain the veracity of the claim, then it takes a bit of time. Our effort is to make sure that we are promptly disposing. So while on normal claims, you get a month to do it and you have 90 days to do an investigation. For COVID related claims, we are trying to expedite it and do it within 15 days, if not 1 day. I can only say, I mean, and this is not a, generally it's a public statement, so I can share. For, I would say almost like 90% of the claims have been settled in 1 day, which are COVID claims. However, there are some claims which are of higher value, which take a bit more time to settle. But one thing I want to emphasize for everybody, all the relevant paperwork is required, and wherever possible, we have tried to create alternate paper, because you have to be very sure of the nominee, because the claimant, see, the problem here is, and people have to understand, it is not about the person who bought the policy. Here there is a nominee, and sometimes there are rivals also, and there are lots of other issues. So you have to be legally also and making sure that the right person gets the money. I think that is the fiduciary responsibility all insurance companies and all other financial services companies carry.
In fact, related to that, I wanted to highlight that it is very important for organizations to, emphasize that documentation, nominees, details and other things are so critical. And I have seen so many cases in the last few months where some of this critical data was missing and we could not reach right financial help to the families. So it is so important to get all the nomination details, documentation and health related checkups for a policy to be active. Some of these things are so basic, but people miss it. And this is important for the, there can be only over communication about this issue at an organization level as well.
Yeah, very important public message, Kavita, that get your nominations right, and make sure the right people are nominated. There are many nominations you make at the beginning of your career. Subsequently,
Yes.
one gets married, a spouse and children. Please change nominations if you have to, and make sure that the claims get settled faster.
And some of the initiative, one of the members again raised this is some of the organizations put an initiative. Those who die of COVID while working, they continue to pay their salary till they're 60 years. But I think every organization will have their own thing. But what is your one point of advice? Maybe I would like to ask Vasanthi Srinivasan as a OB here. What do you think one point which every organization should follow? Taking care of the families which lost the breadwinners due to COVID while working in the organization.
I think fairness. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, very simple. I think as leaders, we have only one question. Are we fair and are we seen to be fair? Yeah, I'm sure others will have some perspectives, but I think if we keep this in mind right through all of the decisions we make, I think it might make it easier.
You would like to add to this because these are the days we need.
No, I completely resonate,
Yes,
and I also mentioned it earlier. Right? I think one point I think as HR professionals, and something I wrestle with, and since there's a lot of HR professionals on the forum, see, the question is, I mean, I'm not, every company will follow their own issue. I think the question that I'm grappling with at a personal level, right? So what should be a policy with employee death, COVID or otherwise? If I do something for COVID, then I should carry it out with all other kinds of death. Should it be seen differently? That's the one question I'm wrestling with. The other question I'm wrestling with is that organizations like us, which are professionally managed organizations, right? We have very, for example, at certain lower levels, we have 5 times the income as group term cover, right? So the question, it's a lump sum money. But again, it's different from saying that I will take care of your children's education till retirement. Well, actually, the financial payout may be significantly higher. So it's also the question of how you position some of these. And I'm raising this not for anything else, because there is an emotional dimension to how benefits are also perceived. So when you make it, the challenge is that financial payout may be seen as only a transaction, right? It doesn't carry the sort of, the emotional, the emotional content that it needs to perhaps carry. And that is also required. So it is a good question for all of us as HR professionals also to think about what is my, so in the way we've tried to do it and I'm sharing. One is definitely the importance of an alternate employment. If there is a spouse or, that is something that you can definitely be considered. The second part is health coverage, right? And of course, then the other parts of the benefits that come in, whether it's gratuity or group term cover or taking care of education or taking care of part of the salary for a certain period. Those are ways and means. So I think the larger point is every organization has to decide how does it want to be seen in the eyes of the recipient. And I think that is how you will design that. And the other point I said at the beginning, well, should it be, only COVID, or should it now extend into a larger policy for any employee who dies during service?
Professor Vasanthi will remember there was a book long years back, I think Pay and OD by Edward Lawler. He does talk about perceived benefits and perceived value of the benefits. And Jude explained so nicely and very nice actually. It's something which we need to really, communicate, whether it is only for this or for every time, or organizations will have to take this forward. And of course, organizations have different ways. We have welfare trusts to take care of employee children for long periods of time. We have actually group term insurances. We have many other medical benefits for dependents. So many things are there, but I think positioning and how does one articulate in this kind of a period is also important.
I think with permission of moderator, maybe we'll exceed by another 5 minutes. The number of questions come, I'll close it as quick as possible, take 1 or 2 minutes more. Because there's so many questions, I don't know how to tell so many of them. Sorry, I'm not able to put your questions. I think I need to put a sincere apology to all the people, especially in social media. This is a question which has come. They said, what would you advise to the people who are inspired to learn something from this outcome? and as a good leader? Yes, I will answer this question. Join CFI, learn coaching, and also join MMA to learn. So that's why we organize events like this for you to come up and learn something. This is the objective of that session. What you're doing, I think I could also answer one question to you, Guy. And there's also another question which has come from self-employed solopreneur. Entrepreneur is a sole guy. How do I create a work culture for myself? Is it possible for me to be practical all the time? I think we have to answer. Maybe Vasanthi, you would like to answer this. How do I create a culture for myself, actually?
Actually, I think entrepreneurs ask me this question because if they don't have customers to go and meet, if they don't have, particularly, anything to trade, how do I keep myself motivated? Okay, so the only answer I can give you, sir, is that probably this is the best time to actually examine the purpose of your business and your enterprise, because you have possibly another 90 days to 120 days to think through these questions before you're back in the mad rush. But I think it asks the question of the purpose of your enterprise, or the purpose of you as an entrepreneur. So take the time and possibly reflect on that. Yeah, over to you, Group Captain.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we got a number of questions, including what dress you should wear, face, makeup, and I think there's so many questions that come. That clearly shows how much of interest you have in really keeping yourself and also your team very, very safe. Thank you so much. I think we can carry on because so many questions, we have no issue. But notwithstanding, what you have questions here has come, I'll try and pass it on to the speakers, and we'll be making this complete transcript of this organization. It will also be published with the embedded video. So not to worry if you miss it. All the video recordings are available. Do share it with your colleagues and friends who have missed. I know on YouTube, more than 20,000 people watched this over a period of within a week's time, because we wanted everybody to take this message, what is being shared by some of the fantastic thought leaders in the subject and what their experience actually working with them, and also a professor from one of the renowned Indian Institute of Management who really seen this happening, really they're interacting with a large number of people. And after Dr. Vasanthi moderating your closing remarks, I would also like to do a presentation on behalf of MMA. I request you to please share your closing remarks. Vasanthi, madam.
Sure. I think I just want to close with the same quote with which I opened, but the second part of it, like I said, in the beginning, I said it was, like it or not, we live in interesting times. And in closing, after listening to the panelists and just the kind of question and answers session that was in progress, I think the quote becomes even more important, which is that they are times of danger and uncertainty, but they are also more open to the creative energy of men than any other time in history. And everyone here will ultimately be judged, will ultimately judge himself or herself on the effort he or she has contributed to building a new world society and the extent to which his or her ideals and goals have shaped that effort. Yeah, I want to just pause here because we spoke of culture, leadership, and pandemic. While a lot of our conversations have been about individuals and organizations, remember that culture is a national phenomenon. So it is for each one of us in some ways to ask, how are we contributing to the new world society post-pandemic? And to my mind, that culture is going to be as important, if not more important, for the society as much as all that we have discussed is important for strengthening organizations. And on that note, a very big thank you to the wonderful panelists for such an inspiring conversation. And I take back 6 pages of notes, and that is to really say something. Thank you so much. And to CFI and MMA for just giving me this opportunity to host this wonderful panel. Thank you. Thank you so much, Group Captain, for making it so easy on me with taking away the pressure of the chat so that I could just focus on what the panelists were saying. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you so much, madam. And in fact, what you said is very true, and each one should contribute to the nation. How do you, as a nation, we are going to show that how agility and resilient we have to face this, and only way we can do this at the moment till everybody gets vaccinated. You have to wear a mask as a token of our appreciation. This is what we do to all the speakers. On your behalf, we are going to present 400 masks going around to the people, make sure the needy to wear the mask. Not only that, we also want to give them mini sanitizer. It will help them because some in a small way on your behalf, we will do that. Thank you for agreeing that. Thanks to all the viewers watching the program live from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And I would like to particularly thank Mr. Ganesh Chella, who really agreed to put together a great evening, really to inspire a large number of HR professionals. Thank you, Mr. Ganesh. Really inspiring to really work with CFI, and you personally really enjoyed working with you. And Suresh Srinivasan, you have been a great source of help to the CEO of CFI, and a great source of help to me in instant getting things totally organized, so that it's taken a lot of our thing and we could focus only on the execution portion of it. And large number of members, all the invitees who joined from CFI, our MMS, MMA, and those, it clearly shows how much interest you have in your employees by the sheer number of people who are participating. It clearly shows, I think the entire the organization of corporate is very safe, and with the HR professionals taking care of most of the serious initiatives, what's happening today. And thanks so much to each one of you, and thank you, viewers. It's really a pleasure to really host you this evening, and thank you for joining and asking so many questions. And only thing what I can say, a parting word, is stay safe, stay healthy, have empathy, keep taking care of all the people who need a lot of help when you can really extend that help to you. Thanks so much. Thank you to our distinguished panelists once again, Kavita, Judith, and Mr. Rao and Vasanthi. You have been a fabulous moderator. Really enjoyed listening to things. You could bring the best out of some of the outstanding thought leaders that you have factory today we have in India. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. And good night. Till we meet again. And good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Vasanthi. Thanks, Jude.